Welcome back to Live from Paris, and Owen's here to give us a business update. Hello again, Owen. Now, we're coming into another crucial week for the Eurozone, and at the start of this week, it seems Asian markets, they're showing a little bit of optimism, at least.
I think we might have had a crucial week once a month for the past 6 months, Claire. This one's no exception. You've got a lunchtime date with Angela Merkel and Nicolas Sarkozy here in Paris to talk about trying to bring Europe just a little bit closer together, and with it, maybe ironing out all these debt crisis problems that have been plaguing the Eurozone and have many analysts wondering whether the euro is just days away from collapse. Be that as it may, the Asian markets are pretty optimistic, particularly about an austerity deal in Italy. More on that in a second. But let's give you the numbers on the Asian markets. You can see there the Nikkei finishing the day's trade around just over 0.5% up. The Hang Seng is still trading in similar sort of territory. Just Shanghai there. Lots of investors taking their yuan out of Shanghai, indeed out of China, on concern that the economy there is slowing down just a little bit, but the Kospi still making some decent gains.
Now, for once, Italy managed to beat the markets. Its caretaker government has drawn up an emergency decree with a raft of new taxes across the board. The cuts will be painful. One minister was in tears over the impact on pensions. But as Winnie Andrews reports, Italy needs to save billions so it can balance its budget within 12 months.
A debt reduction plan to stave off bankruptcy. After meeting for 3 hours, the Italian cabinet approved 20 billion euros in austerity measures.
This is to help Italy to come out of a very grave crisis, an international crisis, a crisis that reflects problems of the Italian economy and society.
The cabinet meeting was originally planned for Monday, but in a sign of its importance was moved up to Sunday so that budget reforms could be finalized before markets opened. The package includes measures to raise the minimum retirement age for both men and women to 66, increase taxes on housing and luxury items and the value-added tax, implement measures to fight tax evasion, and cut political costs. Prime Minister Mario Monti announced he would forego his own salary as part of the effort. But the minister in charge of pension reform broke down in tears when she announced the measures, while protesters voiced anger with their new prime minister.
Former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi had his faults, but we expected different things from Monti, not just this rise in taxes.
The Italian parliament is expected to approve the measures in coming weeks. Many are worried that without action, Italy's high borrowing costs, massive debt, and low growth will throw the country into bankruptcy.
Now, if you're watching us in Ireland, you'll know exactly what years of austerity and budget cuts feels and sounds like, and the path ahead is no exception. The Irish Prime Minister, Enda Kenny, made his first address to the Irish people since becoming Prime Minister a little earlier this year and warned of exactly that. More austerity to come, another austerity budget and cuts of nearly 4 billion euros, all aimed at meeting the terms of last year's EU IMF bailout. Here's Enda Kenny.
Know that if in our own lives we are spending more than we are earning, we have a problem. Right now, the state is spending 16 billion a year more than it is taking in. This problem will not be fixed unless we take action to bridge this gap.
Enda Kenny, the Irish Prime Minister, speaking there. Now, Ireland has received acclaim for meeting its obligations to its bailout creditors. It's likely to emerge from recession at a time when many Eurozone countries are on the verge of a double dip. But that nuance is lost on many people facing difficult choices, as Hervé Amoric discovered.
Ireland is just coming out of 3 years of recession, thanks to the growth of companies like Keenan, Europe's leader in cattle feeding technology. They export 90% of their production.
Next year we plan to grow by 25%, and what's really driving our growth is in investment in smart technology in the last few years so that we can bring together know-how on nutrition and on feed preparation directly to a farm, wherever they are in the world.
Ireland readily brought in austerity measures last year. It is seen as a role model in the Eurozone. But austerity can be a double-edged sword.
Unfortunately, I think what growth we'll get in terms of exports will probably be offset in terms of reduced consumption, particularly with the budget, because the budget is planning to take over 3 billion out of the economy.
Unemployed, Seamus Sherlock created a network to help those who can no longer pay their bills. With this budget, VAT will rise by 2 points to 23%.
It'll have a huge impact on the ordinary people of this country because at the moment people are barely surviving. And if they cut the children's allowance, which is €10, it'll have a major effect on the young people, the most vulnerable in our society, the young people, the children. Hello.
In this ghost estate, Seamus is visiting a couple who lost their jobs 3 years ago.
We are considering immigration at the present moment, strictly because we feel that there's no work here, and we also find that the debt crisis, what we find ourselves in this moment in time, is getting a lot worse.
Many families feel they'd rather leave Ireland than face another fall in their living standards.
OK, let's get a bit more of the day's business news for you now. Investigators say Japanese camera maker Olympus hid up to $1.7 billion in losses from investors in its accounting scandal. That's according to reports from the Nikkei newspaper. The investigators' report is due to be released on Tuesday, 2 months after sacked Chief Executive Michael Woodford blew the whistle on cover-ups dating back to a series of deals in the 1990s. It's understood the inquiry hasn't found any links to organised crime, and it will stop short of recommending key executives be prosecuted.
Samsung has scored a second victory over Apple in their copyright war. A US court rejected Apple's bid for an injunction banning sales of Samsung's tablet computers over allegations its rival has copied iPad technology. Last week, Apple's injunction against Samsung in Australia was also rejected. The two have spent the last 6 months suing and counter-suing over patents in around 10 countries worldwide.
And Chinese jewellery chain Chow Tai Fook is lining up what's expected to be the biggest flotation in Hong Kong this year. The firm is looking to raise nearly 22 billion Hong Kong dollars when it begins trading on the Hang Seng on the 15th of December. If investors snap up shares priced at up to 21 Hong Kong dollars each, the IPO will beat the flotation by Italy's Prada earlier this year.
That's all about all we have time for, Owen, but what have you got coming up in your next...
A little bit more on that Irish austerity package just after 9:15 Paris time. We'll be talking to our correspondent, Hervé Amérique, who filed that report we saw a little bit earlier about the reaction to Enda Kenny, the Irish Prime Minister's first address to the Irish people, talking about more austerity measures to come.
And as you saw there on your screens, you can follow Owen, of course, on Twitter. Thanks very much for that. That's it from me. Do stay tuned to France 24. Stuart Norval will have all the latest headlines in a couple of minutes. Don't go away.
Africa facing climate change.
Climate change, with the growing threat of impending catastrophes, is now recognized as a challenge the whole of humanity must face. In Africa, where many depend on their crops to survive, farmers are at the mercy of the skies. For the African Development Bank, the time for mere observation has come and gone. The problem must now be tackled head-on with programs to promote environmental protection and sustainable development. To face the challenge, the institution has drawn up a climate risk management and adaptation strategy as well as a clean energy investment framework. Both are designed to ensure that all of the bank's investments address concerns for the climate and promote empowerment of regional member countries, RMCs. Over $11.3 billion worth of investments have been flagged up with $5.6 billion in funding for low greenhouse gas emission programs and $5.8 billion for other projects to combat the effects of climate change. In the same vein, the bank has also offered to set up and manage the Africa Green Fund. This will function with resources pledged by donors at the Copenhagen Summit in December 2009, as well as contributions from the private sector. Funding the offensive on climate change is a huge challenge, but it is one that Africa should also see as a golden opportunity to stimulate development and growth.
At the UN climate talks in Durban, Africa will speak with one voice. The Africa Pavilion at COP17, Solutions for a Changing Climate.
France 24 has all the big stories. The Arab Spring, the Fukushima disaster, the war in Libya, the withdrawal of American troops from Afghanistan, the fall of Laurent Gbagbo in Ivory Coast. This year, France 24 brought you exclusive insights into the news that changed the world. Relive these major international events. Tuesday, 12:10 p.m. Paris time on France 24.